So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker. Jim Beaker is going to address total ecosystem services values in Southwest Florida at ECOSERVE method. Here's all Jim.
Good afternoon. I'd like to tell you about the use of ecosystem services valuation in demonstrating principally the decision makers, the values of all the systems we've been talking about throughout the conference. And I'll start out by giving you a bit of the history of what's been going on with ecosystem services. In Western society, the concept of ecosystem services is first written down by Plato, in which he discussed how around the city of Athens could not exist without the olive trees protecting the watershed, providing the mountains from washing down and burying people, as we see does happen when there's not been the proper protection of forest. And that so ecosystem services were at the very foundation of Western thought and the basic method, the Socratic method of thinking about why are things the way they are and what value does nature provide to us. Environmental services was first coined by the book Man's Impact on the Global Environment, and in it, the study of critical environmental problems, the idea that there were services provided to us without any charge that we were ultimately dependent upon. Without them, we would not be able to have our lifestyle, we would not be able to have our civilization. In many cases, could not survive in certain environments, including insect pollination, fisheries values, climate regulation, and flood control. The first use of the term ecosystem services shows up in the book Extinction by Ehrlich and Ehrlich, and here they talk about the causes and consequences of the disappearance of species, and they specifically discuss how ecosystem services will be lost as we lose certain species and keystone species, which are critical to functions within the environment. And all of this is certainly true in the situations that we have here at Charlotte Harbor. Later, the idea of these services, which are utility, have also been expanded into the idea of socioeconomic and conservation objectives, so that there's now kind of a dichotomy in the ecosystem services field of people who talk about the services that are provided irrespective of whether humans value it, and a field group that basically says it's not an ecosystem services unless people know about it and people put a dollar value on it. And these guys like to get together meetings and yell at each other. So, what are ecosystem services? There's a multitude of resources and processes that are supplied by the natural ecosystem. The United Nations Millennium Ecosystem Assessment put them into 4 major categories: the provisioning, such as production of food and water; regulating, control of climate and disease; supporting, with nutrient cycles, crop pollination. Most of the supporting have some aspect of processing associated with them; and agricultural, socioeconomic, spiritual, and recreational benefits, and for us particularly things like ecotourism. Now, we've had some work already done in the Charlotte Harbor ecosystem. Hazen and Sawyer did an evaluation in 1995 and looked at both the consumer surplus and total direct and indirect income of certain functions of the ecosystem services within the total Charlotte Harbor ecosystem. I want to point out to you that these are just some of the ecosystem services provided by the system. So this is a partial ecosystem services valuation. They came out at about $5 million in 1995, which becomes $7.59 in 2012. First work I ever did in ecosystem services was when I was a young environmental specialist for the Department of Environmental Regulation. And there had been an enforcement case down in the Estero Bay by a developer who wanted to build a project called the Estuaries, in what is today the Estero Bay Buffer Preserve Park. And they had done damage to the mangroves down there. And it went to the federal courts, because at that time we didn't have a lot of state laws associated with it. And the federal judge had ruled that the only dollar value we would ascribe to the damage done to the mangroves by the developer without a permit was the commercial fishery value. Now, 80% of our commercial recreational harvested marine species depend on mangrove estuaries. Early in the conference, I heard a number of 90%, so I'm going to investigate that a little earlier. So I did a calculation based upon the 20-foot tall mangrove canopy, which is the type of mangroves that had been impacted, red forest mangrove. And at that time, I had that dollar values available to me from 1970, at about $2,040.54 per year of commercial fisheries landing came for every acre of red mangrove there at Estuary Bay. This is based on real fishery landing, real dollar values. So that's 1970 unadjusted for inflation. This translated into $12,169.98 in 2012 per acre. And if we applied that estimate, just the commercial fishery value, over the entire Charlotte Harbor National Estuary, it would be about $776 million in commercial fishery values coming from the red mangroves. Now, later work I did when I was at the Aquatic Reserve, I was able to demonstrate that hedging mangroves and shortening them in place reduces the net primary productivity and the contribution to the fisheries, so that a 5-foot tall mangrove hedge only contributed about $143.70 per acre per year. Whereas if we left the canopy up 35 feet, which is about our maximum high mature mangroves in Charlotte Harbor, it gave you $6,514.40 per acre per year. So the big difference in hedging versus leaving the mangrove forest alone, and it's non-linear, because I was collecting the litter fall, the whole material to demonstrate how much export was going on. And in 2012, that's the difference between 618 versus 28,020. So when someone hedges a mangrove on Charlotte Harbor, they are taking away from your commercial fishery. Now, that doesn't include the recreational fishery values, which have been calculated to be 5.6 to 6.5 times what comes from the commercial fisheries. So that we could be looking at $146,000 to $169,000 per acre per year in 2012 dollars in terms of recreational fisheries value. And in large part because when someone goes to catch recreational fish, they're much less efficient to spend a lot more money to get that fish. And some of these people come from great distances. You know, people in Washington, D.C. will take an airplane, get on the boat, to hang out with the next president to catch a recreational fish. So they'll spend a lot of money on that. But neither do, those are just two ecosystem service values. It doesn't include the erosion protection value, the tourist income from guided tours, bird watching, canoeing, recreational non-fishing boating, the water quality enhancement that comes from the mangrove, the protection against privacy screening so people can run around naked in their swimming pool with the mangrove screening them, habitat value of these mangroves to endangered threat species, all these other functions. In fact, there are 38 separate ecosystem services value that I'm able to calculate for red mangroves. One of these is carbon credits. It turns out that red mangrove forests are one of the most efficient carbon sinks measured on the planet. Much better than a cornfield, much better than switchgrass. And they can do about 16 tons per acre per year of carbon fixation in a red mangrove. And blacks and whites do a pretty good job too. Our pine flatwoods here are also good. Southern/pine carbon fixation is about 14 tons per acre per year if you let them grow up and don't harvest them for shipping, for pulp, and things like that. So they're very effective. So these two habitats together could provide about 3 million tons of carbon fixation per year within the boundaries of the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program. Beach visitor expenditures exceed what the mangrove ecosystem services are, because people pay an enormous amount of money to get on an airplane in Europe, to fly here, to stay at an expensive hotel, to go out in the sand and burn their skin. It's just amazing. It's with the 72 linear miles of beach with the CHNEP. It comes out about $10.84 million per mile spent in 2002 dollars. This comes from the data that's collected on tourist development, the people that go into the beach, and all these good records. So it's about $1 billion in 2012 that came from beach tourism. That is the #1 reason people come to our region. Oh, they may go to Ingram, they do go to Ingram, they do go to Corrine, but they'll spend some time on the beach doing those things that they do at the beach. So, with the type of work I've been able to do, I can figure out total economic value if I do all 38 of these things for different habitat types. And I started out initially, we used to, before the ECOSERVE method, of calculating out for the mangrove forest total economic value for all the mangroves we know of in Charlotte Harbor, and it came out to about $49.2 billion per year in 2012 dollars. Our seagrass beds at $6.1 billion in 2012. It was less in part because there's less acres, and in part because there's certain functions that mangroves can do that seagrasses don't do, like protecting you from storm surge. Salt marsh, we have much less acres of salt marsh, but it comes out to $77.25 million per year for the salt marshes around the harbor. And these are additive. These are separated from each other. But I want to point out that while I can do this for individual habitats, the real value of the ecosystem, as mentioned by several speakers, is interrelationship. Charlotte Harbor works as a quilt of individual pieces of habitat drawn together by the thread of hydrology. And that interconnection gives even further value to the ecosystem services, and in particularly things like nutrient cycling and hydrologic treatment. Now, a study that I did in cooperation with the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, funded by the Elizabeth Ordway Gunn Foundation, was to estimate the total ecosystem services value for a small area. We only had about $40,000, with also contributions that came from the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program to match that. Pine Island Sound, Sanibel Island, Captiva Island, North Captiva Island, Calusa Island, Yosemite Island, all the other islands in Pine Island Sound, and the near shore Gulf of Mexico, up to the tidal edge of the east side of Pine Island. And so, this is that study area. One of the first things we had to do was make a combined map. This is a rare thing for the Charlotte Harbor area. This is to combine submerged and merged habitats put into one place. And so we did these mergers, we dealt with the edges, and then we even added the more detailed mapping I'd done in my 3-year salt marsh study. Then I applied the ecosystem services value per acre over that landscape, and this is ECOSERVE. This is our way of visually looking at the ecosystem services across the landscape scale. Then I added in the future land use planning that's in all the existing comp plans for Lee County and Sanibel, City of Sanibel, of what the future landscape will look like with build-out. When we transform natural habitats into built habitats, we change some built habitats into other built habitats. And then I calculate the total ecosystem services value for that landscape. Then I added 1 foot of sea level, static sea level rise to that 2030 build-out, because we're going to have about at least a foot of sea level rise into the future, but it's going to be somewhere past 2030 when that happens. And so we bring that up, and then I can calculate the ecosystem services value of that landscape of sea level rise with land use change into the future. And I could do this for a lot of different potential changes. If you envision a change within a landscape, if you want to add new building, if you want to add new bridges, if you want to do some other things, we can show the different ecosystem services topography and calculate the total ecosystem services value. One thing I did in this study that you don't see in other ecosystem services study is account for the fact that you don't just lose ecosystem services when sea level rises, when the land becomes inundated, because that inundated area now has a different ecosystem services function. It becomes shallow and inundated landscape. And that does have some ecosystem service value, even though it may not be a mangrove anymore. It may be less value, but it's still value. So you have to look at the net between what you lose and what you gain as sea level rise occurs. So, here's the bottom line. In 2012, we had about $7 billion worth of ecosystem services value within that study area that I showed you, Pine Island Sound and the surrounding areas. When we did the build-out that's permitted by the comprehensive plans, it drops down to about $5 billion. A 26% loss. But if we then add a foot of sea level rise onto that, and don't change anything else in the land use, it goes down to 4. Another loss, about a 16% additional loss in the ecosystem services values. So we went up finally with a total of 42.85% loss of ecosystem services value between 2012 and the future with build out and 1 foot of sea level rise. Now, many people are saying we're going to see a lot more sea level rise than that, and of course we are. Sea level rise is continuous, and it'll continue, but we could use this ecosystem services model to project that as well. The method has been successful and accepted under review, and Lee County Conservation 2020 lands have also been evaluated using the ecosystem services method with funding from the Audubon Society of Southwest Florida. And I was able to calculate out the total value of Conservation 2020 lands, which are 117 properties within 43 reserves of 24,972 acres, at about $628.8 million, contributed to the Lee County economy each year. And this came out to be about a 3-to-1 benefit to cost ratio in the land acquisition. Now, I've been funded by Collier County, and I'm currently working on a calibration to look at the conservation Collier lands in Collier County, and those are indicated here in red. So I'm doing the same functions. Now, it's important for me to point out to you that you have to recalibrate your ecosystem services functional values each time you use ECOSERVE to reflect the local economy. One of the reasons that mangroves in Charlotte Harbor are so very valuable is because people with really expensive houses and really expensive real estate locate themselves right next to them and get protected by them. And people pay a lot of money to fish here, to recreate here, to be here. The same calculation done in, say, a place like Indonesia, on an island without electricity or social services, may be much less in terms of that individual value of mangrove. Although the functional activity may be very similar in terms of things like carbon fixation. So some values will be about the same in different places, but other values will vary widely. And so I have to recalibrate to Collier County. They don't have as much coastal, so we'll see how that comes out. So this is an important tool, and I have many next steps I'd like to do. I'd like to do this for all of the Charlotte Harbor National Estuary Program area. We have a proposal in with the recovery money to do this for the whole Gulf of Mexico. And I'm all the way around Texas, all the way down to Mexico, because it can be done in all of those different locations. And we could cross-apply this if we calibrate it to the east coast of Florida, and potentially we could go off the watersheds. Because when I did the 2020 lands, I had to evaluate for new habitat types like cypress swamp, which hadn't been done in my first study. But this is all very doable. Thank you very much.
Jim, why don't you just field questions?
Okay. Any questions?
This is very impressive work. Thank you for it. The use of dollars for valuing ecosystem services is well established. And you have started to include carbon. As we look across the country and around the world, I think it's clear that use of carbon as value or equal to dollars will become commonplace and also water will. So when the country say that the Charlotte Harbor Watershed activities on land and streams, do you think it's feasible to have a 3-column outcome for ECOSERVE? One with dollars, one with carbon, one with water. Because in many parts of the world, water and carbon are far more important than else.
That could be done, and we always have to document how we did the transformations. Right now, if we were, say, a European economy, we could easily put a dollar figure on those carbon credits. And I can probably convert most of this back to carbon easily. Water is a little more market-driven.
Thank you.
This gentleman is next.
Yeah, wait your turn, Dave. That question was a better question than I had along the same line. But a lot of the limitations we come up against are the local residents, local communities kind of making decisions about these larger benefits that kind of go beyond just their benefits. Are the people living around the Charlotte Harbor area, these areas that you're working in, are they willing to make that investment kind of from a political standpoint? Are communities at that area of their future
I don't know that we're at the point that this is the only tool people are using to justify decisions they're making. It's one tool being used. So it's become an important tool in their evaluation of land acquisition programs. But I have to say that for some, this is real important information. They're going to make use of it. And for others, no matter what information you provide, they are still very happy with believing the beliefs that they believe without worrying about what science tells us.
Yeah, Jim, really we're the kind of related to what Ernie was talking about, the Snohomish Estuary in Washington State, which is where also Washington is located with the landslide. They've actually done a carbon sequestration associated with natural features project. I'm lucky enough to work with a firm now where the authors of that are working to agree on the state we can't really do a carbon accounting natural resource. One of the things in there is part of the seagrasses have a carbon sequestration comes through a different mechanism. Seagrasses and carbonation, carbonating sediment can actually help offset ocean acidification. So not only can it do a lot of carbon fixation, but how they grow in carbonated geology helps to increase mineral to offset some ocean acidification. There's some neat work that's done that talks about how that benefits coral reefs. That seagrass minerals are important. So I think you're really going to have, I think that there are nice ways to do the carbon sequestration and even beyond carbon sequestration, ocean acidification, mitigation is something that you can as well as before. So I think we're
agreed.
I think there are nice ways to do the carbon sequestration.
Jim, the question I have is basically, what has been the reception you've gotten, and have you had an opportunity to present this kind of information to anybody, I mean, like the legislature at the state level or at the federal level from that perspective? I'm just thinking from a political standpoint, what kind of a reception does this information get?
Well, most of the reception of the cases where I've been able to provide this information have been at local government levels and in the state planning associated with Everglades restoration. And in fact, the Everglades restoration folks, the people in the Marshall Foundation, are very interested in this as a means to look at pre- and post-restoration evaluation. So that when you look at different alternative restoration plans, and some folks are talking, I support the idea of a south path for the water out of Lake Bell. Using this method is one of the ways to evaluate those alternatives. But now I haven't gotten any invitation from the Florida legislature, the federal government, to let them know about this. And quite frankly, the amount of funding that I'm utilizing to do these, like the first project was $40,000. One of the things I did for $500, the one with 5 counties about $5,000. There's not even travel money.
I mean, is there any mechanism to move this information up the ladder as
well? We're sharing it with you. I've shared it with the EPA. I've let people know about it. And when we're done here and we have the session that it's all completed, I'm going to publish it in Florida Science. But the fact of the matter is that this is going to be very useful eventually. And I expect it will become successful when someone else takes my method, puts their name on it, and then it'll be paid attention to.
Thank you.